Today, our celebration of Black History Month continues with part 2 of our conversation with Dr. John Perkins, a champion of social justice, right now on Significant Insights. Hello and welcome to the program. Today, we're concluding an in-depth discussion Greg Bogdan had this past year with Dr. John Perkins. As many of you know, Dr. Perkins was raised on a Mississippi plantation, the son of a sharecropper. He watched his brother die at the hands of the police in the 40s, and he was nearly beaten to death by law enforcement while working for voting rights in 1970. As a youth, Dr. Perkins left Mississippi and found success in California. And it was in California where he was introduced to Jesus Christ. He began ministering to young men in prison, and God laid it on his heart to one day return to Mississippi and to help those in his home state. And that's where we pick up part 2 of the conversation.
So I went back to Mississippi. I got into the community. It was the right time. They was trying to build schools in Mississippi to keep from integrating them. They was trying to make separate but unequal before work. And so they were building these schools, they were building gyms, they were consolidating the schools. And for the children, it was an exciting time. They had their own gym that was now, instead of them being 100 out there in a little school, or 75 in a little school out there, now it was 500 together. They had basketball team, football team. They could compete with each other. So it was an exciting time. I went back there in this area and I asked the principals, could I come in and tell them a Bible story? Yes! Everybody was religious. Even after they passed not learning the Bible in school, Mississippi still resisting the federal government. So I was on a good time. They ain't thought about me for 9 years. Okay, and I went into school. And when I went to go into school, I began to see another part of the problem. I began to say that there was no real philosophy in the community of economic and social and spiritual development. And it wasn't tied together. In the church house, they got an emotional, therapeutical, emotional service. That's what the preacher could do well. I think it did some good. I think it kept a lot of blacks from committing suicide. I think they needed, but it did not teach them a systematic way of learning. They didn't know what you would even call a plan of redemption. It just sort of happened.
Right.
You got under emotional strain and some of that, and you got on your knees and you prayed, and God did something. I'm not denying that. But there was no intentionality in that. It was no plan in that. And so my teaching there, and then I saw that success for those young blacks was to get enough education to migrate out. And so it was a brain drain on the community. They did not believe they could make a difference within their own community. There wasn't an economic support system to do that. The black or white folks owned everything that was commercially, unless you was in an urban area where it was segregated strongly. But if you in a semi-rural area, it's not there. It's not enough people to put together to do that, and I saw it. One night in the bed, I'm doing that, I'm learning. I woke up at night, I saw the condition. I said, Mama, my wife, I call her Mama. I see what we got to do to change Mississippi. I said, we've got to, first of all, get these people to come to know Jesus Christ so they can have some commitment and dedication. We got to teach them how to love themselves, love the community around them, and then to love God more than consumerism and materialism. We hit it head on. And then we got to help them to stay in school, go off to college, and at least 5 or 6% of them got to come back committed to this neighborhood, committed to these people. And then as I began to do that, I began to say, how do you do that? Based on what I was able to see, I call it the 3 R's of Christian community development. What we are doing here is developing a parish concept of community that has been going on with white folk, with Catholics, since as long as it go. Black folks had a parish, but they didn't understand it was a parish. They wasn't intentionally in that. And I said, the first R, we call it the 3 R's of Christian community development. First of all, we got to get the people, those that go off to school, to relocate, to come back. Anybody who want to help them, white, black, green, or whatever, they had to move into that community. This is the initiative. This is foundational. That was the first R of it. And we call that incarnational. That's what Jesus did. He moved into our ghetto, the world. Mm-hmm. He lived among us. Go to the people, live among them, love them, learn from them, plan with them, start with what they know, build on what they have. And the best leaders, when they leave, the people will be saying, we've done this ourselves. We shared what we had within the context of what they already knew. That's empowering or releasing the power of the people. So that's the first R, relocation. That's absolute. Don't mean that everybody got to relocate. That's gentrifying too fast. I even tell people, we don't want all of you.
We don't want to house you all.
We don't want all of you. We just want some of you to come and develop help us to develop something, and then raise up an indigenous person and train them how to do it. And you move on. Mm-hmm. You move on. God is a missionary God.
Relocation is the first R of Dr. Perkins' 3 R's of Christian community development. When we return, we'll talk about the other 2. As we go to the break, Ephraim Smith, president of World Impact, talks about the influence of Dr. Perkins. We'll be right back.
I think he, in many ways, is just as influential a civil rights faith leader as Martin Luther King Jr., as Andrew Young. I mean, though he didn't participate in those televised marches that folks would know in the 60s and 70s, he played a significant role in Mississippi in voter registration, in racial reconciliation.
And was almost killed on numerous occasions.
Yes, and so he's more known in evangelical circles and church circles, but he's a hero of the faith.
Welcome back. Today we're concluding our 2-part series, the Dr. John Perkins for Black History Month. Greg Bogdan had the opportunity to talk with this Christian leader and social justice champion last summer when he was speaking at a ministry event at Park Community Church in Chicago. John grew up in a racially segregated world and personally experienced hate and violence, but his life is marked by love and forgiveness. His life's work is the founding of the Christian Community Development Association, grounded on 3 principles: relocation, reconciliation, and redistribution. Before the break, he talked about the principle of relocation, encouraging some people from a poor community to get a college education and then return back to their communities to live in, invest in, and grow those communities socially and economically. Let's continue with the conversation.
He wants us to build his kingdom like the kingdom we see in Revelation 7. People from every tongue, every nation. That's where he sent us to.
Right.
Into the world. The kind of reconciliation we're talking about today, I'm not at that now. That's the second hour of reconciliation. The kind we got doing now ain't gonna make it. It's drinking coffee and washing black folks and white folks' feet. That won't get it. We got to put it back into the gospel.
Yeah.
We got to preach it with that expectation.
Well, and in that context too, we still see the church as one of the most segregated points in our communities.
Because of the way we doing it.
Right.
The way we doing it. People get tired, and then we're going to demonize the people. This killing part of it is what we have done to the black man. We have created a system of dehumanization. We build a welfare system that mothers can have, and if they husband don't live there, we will be building another Cabrini Green.
Right.
What are you talking about? You think we would understand that? We would understand where some of this anger is coming from in these black people. They just put cameras on people. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all they did. What you talking about? And the church is blind to that. And the church ought to be leading the way. That's why we're going now to a more holistic concept of the idea of reconciliation. And now we are going to do this together. And we're going to, otherwise you got war.
Yeah.
Otherwise you got war. And the whole idea of all of Christianity is to make peace. That's the end of justice. The end of justice is peace. The third hour that we developed there was what we call redistribution. When we said that, they say, you're a communist. Because we had deified capitalism. It's a great system. It's a great system. It's got a great production system, and I would not exchange it for an organized, I don't know of any other system, and I have looked at the social system. It's got a weak distribution system, and it's getting weaker because all the money is stopping at the top. Now, our theory is getting through. I mean, I think that's why I've been able to survive. First of all, we preached about incarnation. We talked about reconciliation being in the gospel. Paul put it in the gospel. I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For therein is the justice of God revealed. And we move justice out of the gospel. And so we have piecemeal the gospel. We have milked the gospel of his power. And so what we got to do is to put justice and reconciliation back into the gospel. And that's why Paul said it is the power of God. The changing the people is the outliving of the end of the Christ. It's God coming to live in us. And we call that a whole gospel on a whole mission to the whole world. Now, you say that, I say that, now that I'm old and seeing this, only thing we did is define community development, Christian community development.
When it comes to community development, how do you guys, or you specifically, how do you see going in and helping the community, and at what point do you see spirituality coming into that? Is that on the front end?
At the front end. We go at the very front end. We don't quite just go in and organize everybody. I did some of that in the early days of the civil rights movement. I organized cooperatives, but I saw that you put together uncommitted, you put together crooks, you put all of those together, and business usually start with one or two people, family, and they have some bond of commitment together. Okay, the church ought to be somewhat similar. It starts with some people who are committed to the best principles of delivering your goods together. And that's important.
Yeah.
But boy, God has got to be our motivation. He got to be our affirmation. He got to be our virtues. We just not organize all the crooks together. A person there needs some integrity for development. Now, secular business people will look at our people and we rehabilitate them like we're doing in some of our centers. They want them. because they know they was crooks. Right. That's why they went to jail. That's why they went to prison. You get that here, we got so we got to get them straight on that. And boy, it's really Jesus who can do that. Yeah. It's really Jesus and that fellowship of believers that's going to disciple people. We're unique. We don't necessarily have to say that we're the best, but we're unique in the sense that we want Jesus there. I did this other together, and finally I reached the place that the loss is too great doing it just as secular. Yeah. And we are doing it now with businesses. I could tell you about a business friend of mine. 35 years ago, we became friends. He had 2 automobile dealership. He now have 12, and now he have a chaplain for his 500 or so employees. Also, the chaplain then is in relationship to his guy's church if he got to work with the family. But if he don't, he'll try to get them into a church. You know, to do that. What my friend who is a Christian, he see his employees are doing better. He's not talking about a minimum wage. He's talking about a livable wage. And he's talking about his people being healthy and drug-free and those kind of things. This works. This works.
The Christian Community Development Association that Dr. Perkins has developed are in communities all over the country and, for that matter, all over the world. To find out more about Dr. Perkins and his association, go to ccda.org. Final thoughts from Dr. Perkins about civil rights right after this.
I sincerely, genuinely love Dr. John Perkins. I've known him for over 30 years. JP, as we know him as, has been a man who initially walked with our early City Team Youth Outreach stuff when we were in the Bay Area of California and coached us up a bit of what it looks like on the streets of our city and saw the absolute authenticity of that man. And then he would start to do some training for our staff. But you know, what truly endeared my heart to John is his extraordinary heart of forgiveness.
I had a significant conversion experience in high school, and outside of reading the Bible, I happened to have a youth pastor at the time who had very high expectations for us. So not only was I presented a Bible, but the first Christian book I remember reading in high school was With Justice for All by John Perkins.
John Perkins.
And I think my passion for urban ministry, for racial reconciliation and righteousness, for the kingdom of God, really came through the combination of being discipled through the scriptures and reading that book.
I think what he's offered to particularly the Caucasian evangelical church is a window, you know, as a window to, in a friendly way, to see what it was like, you know, and he understands their culture, he understands how to speak the language in the evangelical context, but at the same time, with the skill set of a black preacher.
And he's done what he talks about, though. So there's not this gap between kind of say one thing and do another, you know. So the real deal, we would say, that's certainly Dr. Perkins.
To continue our celebration of Black History Month, TLN will be airing the documentary Let Justice Roll On, The Life and Legacy of John M. Perkins. The dates and times are on your screen. Let's take a look at a clip.
I was born in New Haven, Mississippi in 1930. My mother died when I was just 7 months old, and my father gave the 5 of us to his mother, and my grandmother had been the mother of 19 children, and my father probably couldn't read or write. I dropped out of school when I was somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th grade because being a sharecropper back in those days, you was being raised to get to work as soon as possible. And so school for us was not a big deal. Nobody in my family had ever gone probably past the 5th or the 6th grade, so that wasn't a part of the sharecropper's deal. But I began to be educated when I was a boy of about 11 years old. I guess that's when I really began to understand what's going on around me. And this is the way it happened. I was away from home, and I needed a job. And back in those days, during World War II, I must have been about 12 years old, we would make about $1, $1.50 for that day's work. And that's what I was sort of expecting. We went through this field. Here was this white gentleman, he was hauling hay, and he really needed workers, and we asked him for a job, and he gave us a job. And we worked hard that day, expect to make that $1.50 a day's work. But at the end of the day, in his back porch, you know, that's where blacks had to go in through the kitchen. And in his back kitchen, it was time to pay us, and he gave me 15 cents. When he went to give me that 15 cents, I really didn't want to take it because I hadn't been what the sociologists would call psychological, sociological damage. I still thought I had value and worth, you know, and I had worked the whole day, and I should be rewarded for that day's work. But he gave me that 15 cents. I was so disgusted. What I really wanted to do with that 15 cents is take that 15 cents and throw it on the ground and walk out. My dignity would have been intact. But if I would have done that back in those days, I would have been considered a smart nigger. And boy, being a smart nigger, I would have subjected my whole family. They'd have said, that little smart nigger boy came in here and I paid him for a day's work and he walked out of here and left it here, that little Perkins boy. My whole family would have been at risk, and I knew that. And so I took the 15 cents. That's when I began to see injustice as an economic issue.
I could describe Mendenhall when back then you would come across the railroad tracks in Mendenhall. There were no paved streets, no street lights, no businesses, dilapidated homes, poor conditions. Right across the railroad tracks in the white community, there were paved streets, street lights, businesses, nice homes. And you could write the word hopefulness over that community. Over this community, you could write the word hopelessness. And it was in that environment of segregation that we began to dream, or at least John began to dream, and I started buying into that dream of how can we change this community from the inside out so that we can give people dignity, pride, self-worth, and self-esteem.
I've known John Perkins a long time. I know the great work he's done in Mississippi. When I was governor of Mississippi, I relied on him for counsel and advice and inspiration. He has been a force for bringing people together in this state. He's been a force for racial reconciliation, which is a subject that I have long been interested in and identified with. So John Perkins has meant a great deal to me personally, but more than that, he has meant a great deal to the people of this region of the country. He has made an imprint on the lives of so many people, and we are all indebted to him for the leadership that he's provided.
Mendenhall Ministries has been transforming for the community, and not just the Mendenhall community, the Simpson County community, but South Central Mississippi, because Mendenhall Ministries began to demonstrate and model that the church needs to come out of the four walls and start dealing with basic human needs. So what you see in Mendenhall is not only the services you see, but the inspiration of other communities that have learned from us. Because one of the ministries we had was a pastoral training ministry where we trained pastors on how they could also develop these kind of ministries, and a number of pastors went out to do that. So it's been a model and example. It's been a sense of giving other people purpose as well.
The direction of our mission was to bring life to people and to nurture life, and the creation was so arranged to provide the ingredients for that life. And so that I think that's why Jesus directed towards the poor and said, I've come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. And I think the poor was those folks who was not enjoying the abundance of life for whatever reason. And so we ought to be directing it first towards them.
I encourage you to watch this program and learn more about the remarkable life of this Christian leader. Thanks for joining us.